Liberty Blake is a contemporary collage artist known for her abstract landscapes. Born in England, Ms. Blake attended an experimental school as a child that fostered creativity and self expression in its students. She studied art and illustration at Sydney Place Foundation and Bath Academy of Art and painting at West Surrey College of Art and Design before relocating to Utah in the 1990s, where she ran the Art Shack at Sundance Resort. She has been represented by several art galleries in Salt Lake City, including the Modern West Gallery, and her work is included in private collections in the United States, Canada, and Europe. Ms. Blake's collage work explores the interaction between the natural world and human impact. Her abstract landscapes depict places that she has found while exploring on her bike. She works from memory, which imbues her pieces with a sense of her personal reaction and connection to the landscape. She is fascinated by the creation of artwork from found and salvaged paper. She says that her intention is to create work that evokes an emotional response that triggers thoughts and memories and creates a sanctuary for the eye. In the 2000s, Ms. Blake began creating collage murals. The most recent of these murals is Work in Progress, a collaborative work featuring portraits of notable women throughout history. Her collaborator on this project is Jann Haworth, who she also worked with on the Utah Women 2020 mural celebrating the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment and notable Utah women. We are excited to have this fantastic artist with us today.
Jann Haworth was born in Hollywood, California. She attended UCLA, the Slade School of Fine Art, University of London, and the Courtauld Institute of Art in London. Haworth lived in the UK for 30 years and now lives in the Salt Lake City area. She currently holds both US and UK citizenship. Since the early 2000s, Haworth's solo shows have been presented across Europe and the United States, from Art Paris Grand Palais to the BYU Museum of Art. Her work has also been featured in multiple group exhibitions, one of them being the Power Up exhibition. This showcased female pop art in Vienna and Germany in 2010 and 2011. It stood for feminine strategies of artistic self-empowerment. Two things that make Haworth stand out from the crowd are firstly, the rare distinction of being a female pop artist, secondly, winning the Grammy Award for Best Album Cover Graphic Arts in 1968. For co-designing the Beatles album cover for Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Haworth and her work are greatly diversified as she is closely associated with the pop art movement in Great Britain and has also been a lead artist for 7 public work projects in Salt Lake City. Some of which you are probably familiar with, including the SLC Pepper and the Utah Women Mural 2020. Both of these artworks celebrate the historical and the present influence of women. We will be hearing more about this from Haworth herself today.
Awesome, thank you. So I'll start with the first question. How did your project Work in Progress get started and when did it start?
I'll take that. I first thought of the notion for the Work in Progress mural when I did a comic strip, and I think there's a slide to that later on in the sharing of images. I did a comic strip for Wolverhampton Gallery. I wanted to have a free giveaway inside the catalog for an exhibition that I was doing there. And so I came up with 4 different comic strips that I wanted to do. And one of them was Mannequin Defectors. The idea behind it was that mannequins that had occupied windows or been a model for an artist's studio were defecting. Basically, they were leaving the shop window and taking to the streets and marching. They were wearing corsets that were derived from paintings by men, and they were carrying placards that were derived from the work of women artists. So the idea was that they were marching, and I thought, well, they're in a city. It would be interesting if they marched past a bit of street art, marched past a mural. And the idea occurred to me that it could be interesting to take another look at the SLC Pepper mural. And instead of having it be 50-50 women and men, that it would be an all-woman image of heads across a wall. And so I was faced with the fact of having a little square about that big to fill with different women from different fields. And I was fine with visual artists, writers, people in those kinds of fields, theater people. But when it came to scientists, mathematicians, and so forth, I knew very little. And as I began to look into it, I realized how very little I knew, and that I was horrified, basically, that my knowledge was so scanty. And that made me realize that, you know, I'm a pretty active woman as far as the work that women do. If I didn't know it, that meant a lot of people didn't know women of stature in different fields. So I felt we didn't know our history. And I began to ask different people in Salt Lake if they might collaborate with me or help me to find a wall in Salt Lake that we might do a mural that featured all women in all different fields. And the concept was that it would be an all-woman project. As it developed, it turned into a project that was different from the original concept. But in 2016, I mentioned this again to Diane Stewart to say, you know, that's still sitting on the table, this idea. You know, this is, you know, quite a number, 8 years later. And I had been active and trying to get it promoted during that time. And Diane said, it's time to do it now. And the moment was, of course, as we were ramping up to the election in 2016, and we were fairly confident about the fact that we might be in the moment of the first woman president in the United States, as Hillary Clinton was the Democratic candidate. As it got closer to the exhibition, to the election, we were asked to be in an exhibition at TED Women. And the mural at that time then was something that we felt was a ramp up to a celebration for women in this moment that we thought that the exhibition would be, the election would be of a woman president. The moment after the exhibition, I went to UMOCA to look at the work, because I thought suddenly, once we knew that Hillary did not win, we were faced with the fact that the mural, what was the mural now? And it seemed to transform, which was a very interesting moment for me. Instead of it looking like a celebration, it suddenly looked like a protest or shoulder to shoulder. And that was such an interesting moment of like a revelation, really, that these community projects they really take on a life of their own. They seem to live and breathe with the community that they belong to. And they become something different depending on the lens through which you are looking. So this was the first 7 panels that we have that's up on the screen now. And Lib, would you like to speak to the process a little bit?
Yeah, the process is each head is done in a stencil format. So they start, we run workshops with groups of people, and there's some photographs in the slideshow of workshops we did down at BYU. So each person starts with a photograph, a grayscale photograph of the person that they're going to reproduce. And then they cut away, in this case, the darker sections of the photograph. And that's the area that they then paint through, put the paint through the hole that they've cut, so that they end up with a stencil portrait of the person. And the thing that I find very significant and important is that it's a grayscale photograph. This is not like a photoshopped black and white image where the line that they're meant to cut is clearly defined. There's a lot of choice involved with how and where the cut marks happen. So because of that, each portrait has a lot of character of the artist that's doing it. You know, it's not necessarily an easy process, it's an accessible process. But there's a lot of choice and a lot of decision making that happens you know, to do with the paper they choose and where they cut the line, what paint. So each piece is really individual, which I think is really significant and important.
And the works are all on paper. So the final product is a paper portrait. This one that you see on the screen now is Lee Bontaku, and you can see that her eyes and part of her hair have been taken away, but other parts of her hair are still there. And then Liberty takes those and collages them into the panels that you saw earlier. So this one, you can see those holes. So this kind of shows you the evolution of the process. And you can do different colors, or you can do it just in black and white. It depends on the length of time you spend on the stencil or the things that are suggested to the artist, you know, by the stencil. And I'm using the term artist in the broadest sense. I mean, these works are created by the community. About 90% of the people who work on them are not artists per se. They are individuals who may never have done any art before. And that process, as Libby says, it's accessible. And I think it's a, you know, a wonderful inclusive process in that way, that it introduces people to the fact that yes, they can do a recognizable portrait of someone. And yes, they do have artistic choices to make, and to kind of visit that zone, that creative zone in celebration of women is really wonderful.
And that's something we very much encourage in the workshops, you know, that we are talking about the fact that we're, you know, aware of the fact that you know, many of the people in the room may not have done art for a very long time, and that this is something that, you know, that I very much admire the bravery of people to jump in there and have a go. You know, I always imagine that if I was asked to, you know, sing an opera on a stage or something, it'd be like, you know, overwhelmingly daunting, you know, having not sung opera before. But, you know, people are really, really bold, and we try and make an environment that is encouraging and supportive. So, and it's been really successful in that regard.
Thank you. That was amazing. I loved hearing about how this project turned into a collaborative project. If maybe you could speak more on that. What was the process in choosing who collaborated on the project?
Well, it's kind of a thing of throwing a stick into a river. You know, you hope it lands somewhere of interest. And I just talk to people. I mean, at the time, Liberty and I were working at the Leonardo Museum in Salt Lake City. And so people would come through the museum, and we had a twofold project going, really. We would ask them who they would like to see on the mural. So we had a running list of people that were suggested to us by members of the public and by people that we ask, friends and people in the medical school up at the U of U, et cetera, to try to establish a list of who was to be depicted. And then after that list grew to a kind of critical level, we approached the mayor's office, we approached the YWCA, we approached you know, the county, the U of U, and BYU, and we asked if they would be interested in running a workshop with us, if they would be interested in contributing to the mural, either individually or with a group. And we had such a positive response. So we, you know, were working with people who had, you know, various skill sets. You know, they might be you know, in the mayor's office as community liaison people, or they might be a nurse or a scientific research, medical researcher, you know, up at the U, or they might be a filmmaker. So each, we had these very diverse workshops from different areas. And then you know, again, as we had people come into the workshops, they too brought lists of people. So it meant that when we began working with the medical school up at the U, they had a whole knowledge base that I had no access to, except if I Googled people, but I had no way of evaluating that. So they brought new names to the mural because of their expertise. So that kind of, created a very interesting base and outreach. And then before the 2016 election, I met with a wonderful individual, Pat Mitchell, and she got so excited about the mural that she asked us to take it to TED Women, which opened the arena. These are the images from the workshop for TED Women. It opened the scope of the mural to an international stage, because the women that were at the conference came from all over the globe. So it leapt into a different level through TED Women. So instead of it being a Utah-centric project, the two panels that are created, one in San Francisco and one in New Orleans, were both, as I say, international. So that was exciting.
Thank you. Are you planning to add to the work in progress project? If so, what are your plans?
Well, now, Liberty, you have to fess up. The 15th panel, Lib.
Oh, yeah. Yes, we are adding to the because I still have one more panel that we have heads for. But also the idea is, it's called work in progress because of the fact that really it's not a project that either Jann or I would ever feel comfortable saying, yep, that's finished. We've got, everyone's included, because it really is, an infinite project, and I think we'll just keep going with it, as long as, we have the time and resources to do that. There are some, some possible, expansions on the project that we can't really talk about yet. But we are quite excited about some possibilities maybe in the next couple of years with it. Jann, I don't know, can you expand on anything particularly?
Well, I love the idea that it's an open-ended project. The value of it to me is that in a way there'll always be women to add, and I think the other part of it that is important to me is that no one owns it. We can't sell it. We can only suggest to people that they show it. And so as an exhibition piece, all we have to do is to say, well, if you want 9 panels, if Got Print prints that, you can have 9 full-size panels in vinyl sent to you for $150. And that will cost you about $800, $900 for the printing. And it makes it a rather miraculous project from my point of view, in that it isn't merchandise. It's honest, and it can't ever be sold in Christie's or Sotheby's as a work of art. And I think the life of it then adheres more to street art and the graffiti principles that take it away from, a kind of corporate generating money off the back of people. And, the fact that this was made by the community, I think the honesty of it is really, really important, because it's owned by everybody who made it. I think that's a good line in the sand for us to kind of establish some other attitude perhaps towards these community projects. And the fact that Liberty and I decided to put it on panels means that it has a different flexibility too. It means it can go half scale on a vinyl print into a school or a library very inexpensively. And then the school or the library can run projects off the back of that to say, well, let's do a mural that's about our teachers or our grandmothers, or let's do a mural that's about our community. I think as a vehicle for the celebration of you know, more intimate groups, more smaller locales, it's a, you know, it's a wonderful brief. And I think it's accessible from that point of view as a learning tool as well. So, yeah.
That's really exciting. How can people see the project? Where has it been displayed currently?
It's currently down at the granary in Ephraim, and it will be there through next September. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Through the summer. And I've seen photographs so far. I haven't been down there yet, but it looks spectacular. It's the 14 panels. So the 14 panels showed at SUMA last year, and they moved on to the granary. So it's the first time, you know, that the all 14 showed at SUMA first, and then now. So do try and get down there and see it. It really is. These panels, the dimensions of each section are, it's 4 foot wide, 8 foot high. So the full extent is almost 60 feet long. So when you stand in front of it, it really, it's really quite powerful. The heads are just over life size. So you really feel like you're part of, you know, a crowd. It's about, you know, it's very impactful. And then, you know, the fact that you'll start seeing people that you recognize, and then you'll start seeing people that you, you know, want to know, you know, who are they? And then that leads you into the fact that you might not know much about them, and you research. And it's so the curiosity aspect and the impact, which then leads to the curiosity, which leads to the more information, I think is really significant when you stand in front of the actual thing, you know.
Yeah, I'd like to speak to that, because the first thing everybody asks for is the key. Who is that? Who is that? And BYU produced an excellent key that has been in Europe and all over the place because it identifies the 9, all the women in the 9 panels. So, you know, the first thing off the bat in the exhibition in Chichester in England was, where's the key? And so that the BYU researchers who did that are forever blessed, I think. The other thing, to go to your earlier question about the future of it, one of the things I'd really like to do, it occurred to me that it would be really interesting to hang or set the mural as a circle. And if we did it with the 15 panels, it would be about 20 feet across. The idea being that it would be something like an oracle, that you would go into the middle of it and be surrounded by these women. That would put upon us the joy or task of what then would be on the outside. And so the concept that I've been thinking about for that would be that that you would not at first see the entrance to the center of the circle, but you would come up against the mural from the outside, and you would see women, full-size figures, walking. They might be marching, they might be in a parade, a celebration, a protest, but they would be marching on the outside of this circle all the way around until you got to the entrance, and then went into the central kind of oracle space. And of course, in Greek times, oracles were often associated with women priestesses and so forth. So it seems fitting to me. And also the gender symbol of, you know, the circle, you know, could be heralded in the terms of the path leading in, could be a straight line with a cross going across it. That's my ambition, whether it would be with the actual murals or vinyl reproductions or what. It would be outrageous because, you know, it would be way expensive. So I don't know how it would be managed. I suppose if you did it with vinyl, it would be better because it kind of wouldn't come to any harm. But yeah, and the original mural to me is rather sacrosanct, because the surface of it, you really do want to touch it. It has a really lovely sense of the paper and the different pieces of paper, the different types of paper on it. So it would have to have guards and things like that. So it's kind of a pipe dream that I don't necessarily expect to happen, but it would be very nice.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I had goosebumps as you were both talking about that. So that's really cool. In what ways does your work together or individually celebrate and connect to Women's History Month? And why did you choose to focus your work on this?
Well, to roll back the clock a little bit, I guess my access point was really thinking in 2003 about Sergeant Pepper, and you know, that on Sergeant Pepper there were only 12 women. The 12 women were chosen by Peter Blake and myself. The Beatles chose no women to be on the cover. The idea of the crowd was that it was a crowd of choice, that the Beatles were supposed to choose their heroes. As it turned out, they only submitted sufficient names for about a third of what we see as the crowd on Sgt. Pepper. And I felt horrible about that, because of the 12 women that Peter and I chose, 6 of them were fictional. I mean, 2 wax heads, 3 sort of pinup girls, and one other, I can't remember what the other one was. And that was sad. And 3 of the other 6 are Shirley Temple, Shirley Temple, Shirley Temple. So it's really, really sad, and, you know, needs an enormous apology. And the apology was SLC Pepper, to actually say, okay, we're going to do it again. And we're going to look at people who are catalysts for change in preference to celebrities. And we're going to make sure that every time we have a male scientist cited, we're going to have a female. These are catalysts for change in the arts and sciences and social activism. And so that became something that people had to really scratch their heads. So we have a scientist come in from the U of U saying, I want to do Feynman. And I'd say, okay, you've got to find a female balance to that. And so each, it took us on a journey of learning quite a lot. And it was hard to do. Again, I was struck by the fact of, that's terrible that it was so hard to do. And I think, you know, the apology is writ large with the work in progress mural. Lib, do you want to speak to that idea?
Well, I mean, in terms of my personal work, I think you were talking about our work and the project. My personal work, I wouldn't say is particularly focused on the fact, you know, from a women's perspective. I would say that the process of being an artist is obviously hugely impacted by being a woman, in that you know, I became a mother when I was 21, and so my career has been, you know, has run alongside that always, you know. So I think, you know, my experience being a woman is a huge part of my being an artist, but it doesn't kind of feature in my work particularly as a subject.
It does more, I guess, in mine, but then you're doing abstract landscape. So
yeah, I mean, my work is more about the environment, my personal work. Yeah. But Jann, you should speak to your personal work, because that, I think, is
yeah, I mean, I'm more focused, I think, on the figure as central to my work, and I would say that one thing about the work that I do is that I'm always hyper conscious of the relationship of the piece to the person that's approaching it. So all my work is either life size or just over, with an occasional piece like the one that is in the MOA collection, the charm bracelet. that is over life size, but that really is to make the viewer kind of shrink like Alice in Wonderland down to almost being a child in terms of the scale. That the charm bracelet on the right there is about 9 feet long. And so the idea of, the woman as she appears in the art that I do is very much about, for example, the figure or the position of a woman within the picture frame, and how a corset is represented, or how a life-size figure relates to a room. One of the early pieces, well, the earliest figure I made was of a grandmother. And most of my work during the period of the 60s was labeled pop art. I'm not quite sure that the grandmother really qualifies as pop art, because what I was looking at there really was time and aging, and the fact that I felt that there was such a prejudice against the aging face, and I felt that that was, really very sad. And my thought in doing the patchwork faces and things that I did really was to beautify age with color, and the fact that women made quilts and they brought things together, like in cooking, or in teaching a child, or in quilt making, or making clothes. It was like women were synthesizers. They brought disparate things together and fused them. And I very much like the idea of that, and that just runs through kind of everything. And certainly it's within Libby's work in terms of, fusing different pieces of paper from different zones. So she's quilting or patchworking paper. I'm patchworking fabric in the work that I do. So there's certainly a link there, and a constancy, I think, in attitude. And I feel that physically. I mean, it's cooking.
The other interesting thing that relates to that is that we both were doing, had periods of our life when we were doing our work literally on the kitchen table, in between raising a family. And I stopped oil painting and started collage because, the toxic element of oil paints were not conducive to, having little kids around. So collage became my my passion, because purely based on the fact that I was trying to be practical, something that I could pick up and put down easily in the tiny little sections of time I had, so I think being, if we were not women, we probably both, Jann and I, would have had a different art expectation of our careers, and maybe gone about it in a different way. And so that's, that I think that is an interesting, kind of aspect to both our work.
I have to tell you just a little tale. It's not necessarily scholarly, but Libby woke up one morning with her child coming in with a brush saying, "Mom, I've helped you with your painting." And she was doing a portrait of a woman, Lady Lithgow. And it was a really hard portrait to do. Portraits are just hard if you're doing a commission. And her son had worked on the picture overnight that was nearly complete. Fortunately, he'd missed the actual center of the painting in his contributions to her art, but it's that. So yes, being a woman artist is a challenge. I would say one thing to remember at your age, that often there is this great, wonderful brain burst in your 20s, where your creative potential, because your brain is developing and making new connections between 18, 22, 23. It's exploding with great energy. I think that may happen again for women, and in a way, you bring so much to the post-children period. It's electric, that you are re-energized by this vast experience that you have, And I think at, in your late 40s, early 50s, there is this kind of dam burst of dreams if you can harness it. And it's, I think, worth not having a battle with the idea of, I'm at war with the idea of being a woman, wanting to be a mother and producing art and running a household and having a job and all those things. That each enhances your creative energy and capacity. And no experience is left off the table when it comes to either writing or investigation or research or whatever it is that your career choices take you to.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Okay, I think that's a good place to stop. So we'll turn the time over to the response, and then we'll open the Q&A for the rest of the class.
Thank you so much, Liberty and Jann. That was wonderful. And I think I can speak for everyone when I say that it's been very inspiring to hear from both of you. Liberty Blake and Jann Haworth have used their talents to celebrate women's history and women who have made an impact fighting for gender equality. And using our unique abilities to contribute to the gender equality movement is something that I think we can all learn from them. And they've been a great example of how we can each individually contribute. A big emphasis on this Global Women's Studies Colloquium class is making women's studies education available for everyone and helping people understand the importance of gender studies and women empowerment. I think Jann and Liberty's project is a great example of how we can do that and how they've been able to create a community of women that have been able to learn and work together.
I think something that's really beautiful about what their work highlights is that women are not a monolith. That women's history didn't begin with women's liberation in the 60s and 70s, not in the US and not worldwide. We've always been here, we've always had a voice, and now we have a platform. And in today's modern world, we have the opportunity and the privilege and the responsibility to make room for women who have always had something to say in both word and experience. Piecing together the story of women and women's stories in the past, present, and future is and always will be a work in progress. And they have created a space where we can celebrate women's history and women's contributions, and a space where other women can contribute to art and culture in their own right. And not only does the work in progress mural honor the women who it represents, but also the women who continue to create art that forwards their own voice and experience. And representation is as much of a concept as it is an action. And we really look forward to the way that we can all pave a road for women to be seen, heard, and celebrated.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. So Hannah Robinson asked, if at this point you each were to select another woman to add to the project, who would you choose and why?
Whoa.
I have one. I have one that I've been meaning to do, and I just haven't got around to doing it. I wanted her to be a front row figure. She is a downhill mountain biker from England called Rachel Atherton, and she is my choice, and she's the next one I will add when I have time to do a full figure. I want her on her bike going down.
I just saw an article, gosh, I think it was The Guardian. I can't remember the name, but I have the article pinned about a Finnish woman painter that was mind-blowingly wonderful. And so that would be an ad for me. I think, oddly enough, we're a little skinny on representation of women painters on the Work in Progress mural. And so I'd like to hop on that and make that happen. It's a good question too, because I think one of the things that we didn't talk about was the Utah Women mural. And the Utah Women mural, of course, because it was a local project, because that is a very sensitive, dangerous area to go into, because the first question out of the bag is, why isn't somebody so-and-so on the mural? Or let's talk about inclusion. How did you make your choices, et cetera, et cetera. So, that brings us forward to who is it that appears on a mural. And in this case, of course, there are about 300 heads on this mural. And yet there are 1.5 million women who are living who are not on the mural. And that doesn't take us through the history of women in Utah, or the deep history of the Native American population. So again, the work in progress title is a good title because it says, hey, this is only a snapshot. This is only a little thing. So really each of the women that work and make this state great or the world great is, should have a place on a mural. And, digitally that might be possible if somebody developed an app that did that. We left 3 blanks on this mural so that you could add your aunt or your grandmother to the mural itself. And I think perhaps that's a good way forward that we might incorporate in the work in progress. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. You kind of touched on this a little bit, but Eliza Bennett asked, what role do you believe art takes in activism or should take both in the women's rights movement and other worldwide movements?
Well, I'd like to jump in on that because the image we know from graphic design and the way the brain works, the image is first. That's the first thing you see, and then you may read text. So although the image is silent, it seems to me that it has a very powerful place to be. When you go into an election period, someone like me says, am I doing enough? Am I doing something that matters? And I have to, during the pandemic, when we were working up the work in progress mural, the Utah Women mural, was I doing enough? I felt I had to have that conversation with myself to say, the image is impactful. It sends a message. It sends a fair message. It doesn't tell you what to think. It is an indication. It's a arms open thing, and you may bring a different message to it. So I think the role of the visual artist is first to be clear in terms of what they are hoping to say with themselves, and then with the audience that they hope will be involved with the work that they do, and to get the image out there. And we can celebrate the fact that with Instagram and various other channels now, our images can spread worldwide. If they are really saying something that people want to hear, we can spread them very quickly. So I think the role is that to be active, to be present, to participate, to care, and to listen carefully to the feedback that you get, and to do the work that you should for your community. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. How does working together as mother and daughter impact your work? That question was asked by Janley Emmer.
I'll start there. We work together so incredibly well. I think that having the background, as Jann's my mother, and obviously, and so the trust and the respect and the knowledge of each other is so strong that it means that we can work together really almost without talking, that we understand the process. We've run the workshops together, and then the actual process of the collaging of the murals I do, but we discuss it together, and it just is seamless. And I think it's just because we have such a deep knowledge and respect for each other, as artists, as as family, as in terms of the way that we're trying to teach. And it's just such a joy. So yeah, I'm extremely grateful for that opportunity, to work with Mum.
it I guess was partly modeled by my mother. I mean, she always would kind of skipped over the idea of daughter and said, you know, my best friend, you know. So I think, you know, the way the family is kind of constructed today is possibly kinship is shifting. I mean, we used to think that it was quite normal to see a sign that said, you know, so-and-so Jones and Sons working together. And then we get confused with nepotism and, you know, things like that, or the power of an adult, you know, mother over a child or something like that. And I think that what happens is that really unconsciously these things, you know, kind of dissolve. You know, you are with another human being that you have so much in common with, or so much that you know about each other. It really is sort of a very easy process. And I think if it wasn't, obviously we just wouldn't work together. But it is that kind of unspoken thing. I mean, on the collage work, I think of myself as the gopher, you know, that I go for things for Libby to keep, you know, whatever she needs. You know, I don't see myself as making decisions about it at all. And I think it's working collaboratively is at the core of these projects. It's the heart of the matter that neither Libby or I could make these murals alone. I mean, they're too big. I mean, the Utah women one, I mean, it just would be utterly impossible. So, I mean, that's 6,000 square feet, you know, it's not going to happen with two artists. So the idea of learning to listen to the person who is making something and getting out of the way, when they say, so which paper shall I use? Which paint shall I use? You say, you know, it's your choice, you know, and trusting that process is something that we've learned to do. I mean, I did a mural with Picture Line, and trusting the input of Jens Nielsen, who runs that company, when he said, no, I think the mural should do this, trusting that and saying, you're right, and moving with someone. It's a joy. It's a joy for everybody involved, you know, and as an artist, to do the diva stuff is just, you know, and maybe that's a female quality. You know, you listen to your children, you learn from your children. I have learned more from my children than any other source of learning. So, you know, it's that, I think, you know, that to value that which is said and to really care for it and listen to it.
And honesty. I think when you know someone very well, it's easier to be direct and honest and have a, you know, therefore quite efficient and productive conversation.
Yeah, all of a sudden you say, Lib, ugh.
Yeah, that's awful. Okay.
That's very rare, but and then you say, no, Mom.
I know what I'm doing. All right?
Exactly, go away.
Okay, well, thank you. I think we are out of time, right, Professor Ekstrom? Okay.
Yes, Kayla, are you turning it back over to me then? Okay, great. I just want to ask everyone, we're so grateful that Jann and Liberty were willing to be with us today, and I'm grateful for the audience members who've shown up and for this give and take and participation. I just think it has been a delight today. And I think it's okay to let you know, I mean, I've told the students dozens of times about how discouraging it is for me to not be able to be in the room in person with the students. And of course, Jann and Liberty are local, and so it would be lovely to have them on campus with us talking to us. But I'm just going to announce that the Global Women's Studies program was able to acquire half-size prints on vinyl of work in progress. I think we have 14 panels. I think we've got all 14 panels. And so we're hoping that in the fall, when we have our big open house, when everybody has their vaccinations and we're able to be together in the Women's Studies office again, and we have brownies and everything to celebrate that, we'll have the panels hanging in the Global Women's Studies office, and you'll all be able to come in and see them. We're just really thrilled about that. That is not to say that you should not head down to Ephraim to see the full-size panels, the originals. I mean, what an amazing experience. And when they were in the Museum of Art, it was one of the highlights of my year to be able to see those panels. And so just thank you. Please, everyone, join me in virtual applause, and however you do it. This has just been such a terrific experience. Thanks so much.